Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for joining us for our AI Meets Ethics series presented by Dash. I'm Victoria. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently a first-year master's student in the Faculty of Medicine in the WATCH program under the supervision of Dr. Sarah Monroe, where we look at qualitative research and a lot of knowledge translation. So I'm really excited to be here today. Before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge that we are on the land of the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. So I just wanted to take a minute and acknowledge how grateful we are to be here and privileged as well. So thank you again for joining us today. So just a little background on the DASH team. So we are the UBC Data Science and Health Cluster. So we aim to bridge the gap between the health system data and UBC's data science and research infrastructure, embedding data analytics and innovation within clinical medicine to improve patient outcomes. So yeah, thank you again for joining us for the AI Meets Ethics series. So I just wanted to introduce our speaker, Dr. Madeleine Ransom. So she is a philosopher who works on perceptual learning and expertise. She is interested in understanding how perceptual learning differs from other forms of learning and how it contributes to human expertise in many domains. So in her research, she also focuses on understanding how perceptual learning can go wrong and cause expert judgments to be biased in some way. So I just wanted to thank you again for joining us today and presenting your talk on how can companion Carebots help us flourish. I'll pass it off to you, Dr. Ransom. Thank you.
Great. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. Hopefully, I can't see the chat, so please feel free to put questions in the chat, but just know that I will only be able to answer them after the talk. If there's something crucial that you feel you need to ask during the chat, then maybe you can unmute yourselves and ask me, but otherwise, we will hopefully get to some good discussion after the chat. So before I talk about Carebots, what I really want to do is sort of just give you a bit of background on loneliness amongst the elderly, because this is often the problem that Carebots are thought or are championed as solving. So loneliness in Canada amongst the elderly, the most recent sort of stats here from Stats Can are about 1.1 million older Canadians experience loneliness. You can break that down by age to see here. And so why is this a problem? Well, in terms of health, we know that frequent social contact is important to elderly care. Social engagement plays an important role in the prevention and treatment of depressive illnesses in older people. And lack of social engagement is a significant mortality risk factor. So what are companion Carebots and how are they supposed to help with loneliness? So these, as I'm going to be discussing them here today, are any robot or AI meant to keep elderly people company and stimulate friendship and social engagement. So I'm not going to be talking about robots like Robear, who are designed to lift patients out of beds and into wheelchairs and help people who need assistance to stand up. So there are a lot of robots that are being piloted or rolled out that are meant to help people with practical needs. And what I'm going to be focusing on instead in this talk are those robots that are designed to meet social needs, so social robots. Borderline cases that I'm not really going to be so interested in are cases like Pero, which, so this is, you might have come across this before. It's this sort of cute, cuddly robotic seal that makes these purring noises and responds to people's touch. And it has a lot of the same sort of benefits as animal therapy, but there's no social interaction in terms of a conversational component. So it's sort of a borderline case. Another Potentially borderline case are AI-enabled virtual assistants that engage with older adults to keep tabs on their movements, medical needs, and call emergency services in times of crisis. So this may or may not fall within my sort of circle of interest, depending on whether or not there's a companion function. So some of these are meant to have a sort of conversational component as well, and to sort of simulate friendship. More squarely, the kind of thing that I'm interested in. So for those of you who are familiar with Alice, who is designed specifically to aim to relieve loneliness and improve the quality of life of the elderly. Closer to home. So Alice is a project that's that was rolled out in the Netherlands, but closer to home, there's Grace. So this is the product who is piloted actually at the Jewish General in Montreal. And Grace is designed to converse, tell jokes, do reading exercises, and speak about topics that seniors might be interested in. So this is the kind of thing that I'm really talking about today, these sorts of companion care bots. And then the question is, so these are meant to address, and the companies that create them are very often explicit about saying, hey, what we're trying to do is address loneliness amongst the elderly. And so we might wonder what the risks are to human well-being that stem from companion care bots, and can they really help address the problem of loneliness? And often when people talk about this, they bring up the worry of potential replacement of human care workers that provide companionship. And notice that this is only a bad for the elderly if we think that there's some benefit or good from the human relationships that the care bots just can't provide. Or maybe if there are other ethical reasons not to provide these care bots. So there might be ethical reasons that outweigh the potential benefits. So what I'm going to do, so there's a lot of debate and discussion about potential benefits and drawbacks. I'm going to focus on one argument here, which is an argument from Deception. This is from Sparrow and Sparrow, 2006. This is my reconstruction of it. So first premise, providing technologies that will deceive others into believing that simulations of friendship, love, and concern are genuine, that this is morally wrong. So if we provide these technologies, these sorts of companion bots, that is morally wrong. Companion bots simulation of friendship, love, and concern will in fact deceive many elderly people into believing these simulations are genuine. Therefore, it's morally wrong to provide companion bots to the elderly. Okay, so why should we believe premises 1 and 2? I'm going to sort of give you some different reasons to believe them and sort of unpack them a little bit. So the first premise here, there are 3 reasons, 2 of which are provided by Sparrow and Sparrow, and the third is one that I provide that is going to tie into a later discussion of autonomy. So look, say Sparrow and Sparrow, most of us have a preference that our life actually contains certain goods. We don't just want to have the illusion that it contains certain goods. So ask yourself, would it make a difference to you if your partner and friends were all paid actors, or your partner has been pretending to love you solely in order to receive some financial benefit? Suppose you never found out. It seems, nevertheless, you would have a preference to be in a situation where your friends were genuine rather than paid actors. And so if that's the case, then probably you have a preference that your life actually contains the good of love and friendship, not just the illusion. So the problem here is that we're not satisfying people's preferences because we're just sort of giving them the illusion that their preferences are satisfied. The second reason that you might think that this is morally wrong is because you might endorse something like Sparrow and Sparrow endorse this claim that deceiving or helping to deceive others, even for their benefit, is always morally wrong, because we're not respecting others as ends in of themselves, but only as a means to an end. So we're not respecting their humanity. This is a line from Kantian deontology. Some people think it's too strong, and there might be cases where actually it's not morally wrong to deceive others. But if you endorse this principle, then, there's no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny. What you're doing in deceiving your children is morally wrong. The third reason that Sparrow and Sparrow don't discuss, but that I want to bring up because it's going to be relevant to our discussion, has to do with a person's autonomy. And so here, autonomy is generally recognized as a central value in moral theory, but it's also a well-established value that medical professionals often consider when difficult cases and conflicts arise. So it's a sort of a central value by which people can decide what to do based on whether or not a given procedure or revealing a piece of information or not revealing it would violate that person's autonomy. What is autonomy? Well, like any term, there's some controversy about exactly what it is, but you can think of it in terms of self-governance or being able to live according to your own reasons, desires, motives, and values, rather than those that are the product of manipulation, deception, or other factors. And of course, I've highlighted deception here because it's directly relevant to understanding why we might think that this deception is morally wrong, because it violates people's autonomy. So it violates the autonomy of the elderly. Now, that is enough to motivate the first premise, that it's morally wrong to give people technologies that would deceive them. Why think then that companion bots that simulate friendship, love, and concern will in fact deceive many elderly people into believing these simulations are genuine? So what reason do we have to believe this? So here I'm going to unpack this a little bit. So first, just to explain why I think that companion bots are not in fact capable of real friendship, love, or concern, why I think that they're only simulations. Because if they were capable of real friendship, love, or concern, then we wouldn't have this argument in the first place, because there would be no deception. Their friendship and love and concern would be real. So the background to this won't be the main focus of the talk, but I thought it was worth just sort of spelling it out because I wasn't entirely sure what sort of background the audience had. And so here, the basic idea is that companion bots are not capable of real friendship, love, or concern because they lack sentience. Where sentience is understood as conscious experience with a hedonic tone or feelings. And the idea is that if you are to be capable of real friendship, love, or concern, then a being has to be sentient. They have to be conscious, where that consciousness contains some sort of hedonic tone or feelings, because only sentience actually allows a being to have the feelings that are essential to friendship, love, and concern. So you can't be concerned for someone if you don't have these conscious feelings. You can't love someone if you don't have these conscious feelings. And so since companion bots lack this sort of sentience, then it follows that they cannot actually have genuine love, concern, or enter into friendships with people. Right, so with that background, why believe that many elderly people will be deceived into believing that these simulations are genuine? So here, the claim is that many elderly people are susceptible to taking these technological simulations as authentic. And one reason that Sparrow and Sparrow give for endorsing this is to point out that elderly people often have declining mental function that may cause them to have trouble distinguishing between fiction and reality. And here, I think rightly so, the objection that some people have raised is that this makes it the case only that it's wrong to use companion bots in those limited cases where, in fact, people do have trouble distinguishing between fiction and reality. and not for elderly people who can distinguish between the two. So it would look like it's only morally wrong to use companion bots in very limited cases, but there are many elderly people who don't have this sort of trouble distinguishing between fiction and reality, and for them, it would seem fine. And so here, I'm going to draw upon some different literature. So this is a 2011 paper from Sharkey and Sharkey, who they provide this sort of alternate argument where they draw on empirical research on anthropomorphism, which suggests that elderly might be more likely to anthropomorphize than the general population. And this is because the tendency to anthropomorphize non-human agents depends in part on the desire for social contact. And when feelings of loneliness are induced, people are more likely to anthropomorphize pets and gadgets. And so given, like, you remember how I started this talk talking about loneliness amongst the elderly, this may make them more susceptible to deception. And here, there has been a sort of a pushback against this idea that the elderly are in fact deceived, which is that anthropomorphizing is a form of play, not deception. So it's not the case that the elderly are really deceived. Consider the example of children playing with toys and dolls. There, you see kids who get really into playing with their toys and their dolls. They've got all these sorts of fictional scenarios. They're highly engaged. They treat these things as if they are minded. And yet, if you ask them, is that doll real? Or, they'll say no. So they understand that what they're doing is play. And so the idea here is our more general sort of anthropomorphizations. Those are kinds of play. And so it's not the case that we're deceiving people by providing companion bots. What's going on is something different. And moreover, play is important, say Coyne and Jeblovic, because it's an important capability and we want to promote it because it enhances people's quality of life. So actually, these bots help enhance quality of life for the elderly. And furthermore, it looks like companion care bots could actually enhance autonomy. So they point out that the use of care bots, if freely chosen, is autonomous because it flows from the person's values and unfettered volition. Maybe they desire to be playful and interact for existence, for example. And now, as they've argued, those people are not deceived when they anthropomorphize. They're playing. And they point out that it helps to maintain a level of cognitive functioning through externalizing memory storage and retrieval. So if you think of these sort of as cognitive functioning as enhancing autonomy, then if these care bots can help people's with their memory storage and retrieval, then it looks like it's enhancing their autonomy. And we might add here that care bots could promote autonomy by allowing people to stay in their communities longer, by helping them stay mentally sharper and safer, and so on. So it looks like there are actually benefits to our autonomy, and perhaps there's no deception. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to propose that there's this potential for diminished human social interaction that we should be very, very worried about. And usually when people talk about diminished social interaction as a result of care bots, what they have in mind is a scenario where companion bots replace care workers. And that's not the scenario that I have in mind. I think that this diminished human social interaction can occur even when the care workers are still there. And so what I'm focusing on really is how companion bots can alter people's preferences so that they prefer the company of bots to humans and desire to interact with other humans less, even if they are present. And I've got preferences and prefer in scare quotes because, as I'm going to argue, I don't think that those are considered preferences. They're sort of compulsions or addictions in some cases. So I'm going to consider two ways this might happen. One is social snacking or social shielding, and the other is addictive tech. So social snacking and shielding comes out of a model by Gardner and co from 2005 on, so what he's doing is, or what they're doing rather, is sort of providing a model of belonging regulation. And their original idea was that social shielding and social snacking occur when there's no positive social interaction that's possible. But I'm going to sort of discuss cases where it might be that the social interaction is possible, but this provides some sort of benefits that cause you not to engage in further attempts at social interaction. So what's social snacking? Here's how it's introduced. When hungry, we want a meal. However, when we do not have the proper time or resources to create a meal, we're often willing to settle for a snack. Similarly, we propose that there may be social snacks that provide temporary stopgaps for social hunger when a social meal interaction with an accepting other is unavailable. So as it was originally conceived, the sorts of examples that Gardner gave were things like rereading emails or letters, photos of loved ones, memories, and daydreams. But people have sort of taken this term and reinterpreted it in some ways in the literature that I think, so it's an evocative metaphor, and often when people talk about social snacking, they're actually talking about something called social shielding, which is this sort of creating imaginary or illusory relationships with social surrogates. And so the paradigmatic case of this is parasocial relationships. So relationship where these are relationships with figures unable to reciprocate, such as TV or fictional characters and famous people. And one thing that I just want to draw attention to is how much the lines have been blurred in a lot of cases. So the first picture I have here is, thinking about OnlyFans, where there are people who have these accounts where they interact with their fans to some degree. So there is a sort of a relationship, but much of that relationship is fictionalized in the sense that the person, the user who's usually paying, is sort of creating a lot of that relationship, and the person who's sort of on the receiving end of the payment is not as invested. And then, of course, sex dolls, people who marry their sex dolls is another kind of case where there's a parasocial relationship going on. But at the same time, there's this sort of component that is very compelling and very, very sort of realized in day to day. So the thing that, so as you recall, on Gardner's model, snacking and social shielding are only used when human interaction is not available. But there's some evidence that using companion bot interactions as social snacks or shields may decrease people's desire to engage with humans. I think more research is really needed on this. So I'd like to see more studies on this, but be that as it may, here I'm talking about a 2018 study where participants spoke with a virtual chatbot about personal topics like likes and dislikes and frustrations. So that's a picture of the chatbot that they engaged with. And then they filled out a questionnaire designed to measure their willingness and intention to socialize with family and friends later that day. Those who were rated as having a high need to belong had lower scores, so they had less willingness and intention to socialize. And after the interaction, so which suggests that basically that they had been sort of satiated, that this sort of interaction with this virtual agent had sort of satiated their social needs. And also, after the interaction, participants had the option to play a game either with the virtual chatbot, with another participant, a human participant, or by themselves. And most people chose to play with the virtual chatbot rather than the other participant. Right. Okay. So this suggests, or is at least suggestive, that there may be some satiation through snacking or shielding. And so this kind of gives rise to the worry that that people might be prioritizing snacks over meals. And so even when human contact is available, we might nevertheless prioritize the sort of the easier technological option, the sort of the easy snack. And so this is why the social snacking metaphor has really sort of taken on a bit of a life of its own, because there's this idea of sort of snacking on something that's not as nutritious, but more easily available, more readily available. And it takes more effort to prepare that meal, and it takes more effort to sort of engage. And so people may just sort of reach for the default, less nutritious sort of snack option over the meal. Okay, so what about companion Carebots as a potentially addictive technology? So with the case of Eliza, so I really wanted to start out talking about Eliza, who was developed at MIT in the 60s and proved to be, so it was a super basic sort of conversational, it didn't have the capacity, so it wasn't learning. It was a sort of good old-fashioned AI kind of program. It was top down. So any kind of changes you had to make, it was working from scripts. And the basic idea was that one of the scripts it had was this psychotherapist, and people started, what was so surprising to the creator was that people started to really love it and really, you know, attribute sort of human characteristics to it and want to spend time, even, you know, so there were, you know, original kinds of tests, but then people were asking to go and to have conversations with Eliza and, you know, asking. So there's this sort of anecdote of Weizenbaum's secretary asking him, you know, can you leave the room so I can have a conversation with Eliza? And the idea was basically that this bot was really just taking time to listen, so, you know, listen in scare quotes, and allowing people to sort of explore their feelings and emotions in the way that, you know, a therapist would. And so already at this sort of very early stage in what we might think of as a companion bot, we saw that there was this sort of compulsion for people. There was this attraction, and there was this deep compulsion, this deep need to engage in this kind of conversation. And so that's a sort of an anecdotal kind of reason to think about why companion bots might be addictive. A more sort of a less anecdotal reason is, so there's this nice recent paper talking about the taxonomy of features and technology that promote addictive online behaviors. And so we can draw from that. So they point out several psychological mechanisms that may be involved in the development and maintenance of online addictive behaviors. And so here I've just selected a few for relevance. Most prevalent, you know, so most relevant, feelings of isolation and loneliness, also social anxiety, decision-making impairments, inhibitory and control impairments, and emotional dysregulation. And so if these put people at risk of developing and maintaining addictive behaviors online, then we can extrapolate and say that they may put people at risk of becoming addicted to their Carebots. And then there's also, so I'm not going to go over, I don't actually see the time on my computer. Let me, okay. Oh yeah, I'm not so bad. So let's see, play from current slide. Okay, I thought I might be going over time. So here, there are several different technology design features. So infamously, we know that there are companies who are exploiting different, you know, cognitive biases and sort of reinforcement learning in order to cause us to be addicted to their technologies. So what Flail et al. Tried to do was to sort of taxonomize these into different kinds of online behavior that are often lead to addiction. And the idea here isn't that all of these will be relevant to Carebots or companion bots, but that when we're designing technologies, we can think about how setting them up in certain ways may actually cause them to be more or less addictive. And so why, to go back to this idea of autonomy, what I want to, so recall that the objection was, the objection to Sparrow and Sparrow's argument was something like, well, these Carebots, they don't really violate autonomy. In fact, they can help enhance autonomy in certain ways. And then Coyne and Dublovic gave several examples. But here, what I want to point out is that addictions are generally considered to violate our autonomy. So exactly why is controversial, because people don't have an agreed upon definition of autonomy. But Harry Frankfurt, to give you one sort of definition, he says, well, look, in order for a desire to be autonomous, we have to desire to have that desire. We have to endorse the desire. And addictions often lack this structure. We don't desire to desire the thing we're addicted to. So we wish that we didn't we wish we didn't watch scandalous YouTube videos, trash TV, or spend hours on smartphones at the expense of genuine social interactions. And yet, nevertheless, that's the characteristic behavior of many people who have that wish or desire. Okay, so the upshot of this is that if companion bots are designed to be addictive, then it turns out that they violate our autonomy after all. Now, is it inevitable that companion Carebots be this way? I think no, and I adopt a general sort of human flourishing approach to technology. So here's a graphic from a recent paper by Stahl et al. That sort of gives this nice Venn diagram of the three sort of possible purposes of AI. So here we have efficiency, optimization, and profit maximization. So very much sort of standard objectives of the firm. Then social control. So you can think of objectives of many governments around the world using surveillance technologies in order to get people to behave. And then human flourishing, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that is, but just think of it in terms of promoting human well-being. And so, the question really is, is there a sweet spot here? Do we want there to be a sweet spot? Is any form of social control desirable? And so thinking about how these three interact is probably a topic for another talk. However, what I'm going to suggest is that adopting a human flourishing approach where these may or may not overlap is, I think, the way to go with Carebots. So what's human flourishing? Well, Aristotle's original conception of human flourishing was in terms of eudaimonia, which is often translated as happiness. But given the sort of the current use of that term or the way people think about it, it might be better thought in terms of well-being. And he had a very particular take on what constitutes well-being. And here, I think we can think more broadly in terms of basic capabilities and circumstances that make a person's life go well. What are those? Some people just provide a list, a sort of objective list theories. Other people have a sort of a more integrated account, but I'm not really going to adopt an account here. Just to point out that friendship, social interaction, and autonomy are likely going to be, I don't think it's very controversial to say that they're likely going to be among those sort of basic capabilities and circumstances that make a person's life go well. Okay, so what would design for human flourishing look like? Well, here the idea then is the primary or overarching values that ought to be maximized are quality human interaction and autonomy, perhaps amongst others. And so going back to that Venn diagram, the idea is that only social control and only profit efficiency and maximization are acceptable, insofar as you can also maximize quality human interaction and autonomy. Okay, so the guiding questions when people are developing technologies is, does this feature promote human interaction, either directly or indirectly? Does this feature promote the person's autonomy, either directly or indirectly? What would that look like for companion bots? So first, I think it would look like not incorporating addictive components to design, such as the bottomless scroll or unlimited use time, especially during periods when social activities are occurring. So we don't want these companion bots to be too engaging. And there you can see right away a sort of a conflict, potential conflict with profit maximization. This has been the problem of a lot of emergent social media. Helping to keep patients mentally fit through conversational practice. So this is something that came up with respect to helping to promote autonomy with companion bots. If somebody is mentally fit, then they're better able to sort of exercise their will and their autonomy. Privileging the suggestion of activities that people themselves have requested or that align with the person's interest. So, you know, the new Sunday crossword is ready to play. This is a feature that sort of personalization has already been a component of a lot of the design of companion bots. So I think that people have done pretty well on this one. What about promoting human interaction? So again, this I think is something that has been partially made good on in some of the technologies, like helping to recall information about family, friends, so birthday stories, likes and dislikes, and prompting people to send messages, presents, or calls. So creating opportunities for social interaction, allowing for participation in remote group sessions like book clubs and therapy. So again, promoting human interaction. The technology reduces a barrier to human interaction by allowing people to participate when they're not physically here. So in this sense, I mean, you don't need a companion bot. You know, you could just get on Zoom, but of course, elderly people often have problems utilizing technologies. And so an interface that would reduce the barrier to using those technologies would be useful. Helping to coordinate family visits, inform and remind people of relevant social outings, volunteer opportunities and activities. And then facilitating meaningful conversations and positive interaction with family and friends through games and prompts. This is something I'd like to see more of, more thoughtful design that incorporates these things. I think there's a lot of missed opportunities in the current technologies to really think through how you can create games and conversational prompts that will shift the focus of interaction from the robot to the other person in the room, or the other person that is being conversed with virtually. Okay, and so the last thing I'm going to do today is just talk briefly about when these two might conflict. So antisocial or introverted types, people sometimes don't want to converse, and so those people should be able to opt out. People with strained family relations, so here, again, they should be able to opt out, but perhaps if such people are interested, maybe these companion bots could serve as a source of advice, facilitation, or therapy for improving relations. People who don't have loved ones. And so here there's a real question about if such people have an interest in forming new friendships, how might companion bots help? And privacy concerns. So companion bots with insecure data collection and storage policies, which are vulnerable to hacking or misuse by care staff. This would be cases of violations of autonomy. And of course, corporate interest that we've already spoken about a bit, where companion bots designed with addictive technologies that nevertheless promote human interaction. So they reduce autonomy, but they nevertheless promote human interaction. All right, so that's all I wanted to do for today. Let's stop and go to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ransom. That was really amazing. we had one question. How do you think the advancement of NLP will affect the use, effect, and ethical considerations of companion care bots? And please keep sending your messages in the chat. I will read them out as they come in.
Oh, sorry, I can't see the question. I was just looking at the chat to see if there were questions, but I can't see that written there.
Sorry, I'll add it in the chat. I think it was just sent to me specifically.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, my bad. Can you repeat the question then?
Yes, I'll put it in the chat quickly. How
Oh,
do you think the advancement of NLP will affect the use, effect, and ethical considerations of companion care bots?
yeah. So I think that it's going to make things a lot worse. So in terms of potential addiction. So my purpose in talking about Eliza was to show how such a sort of really basic, program, like a real go-fi kind of AI, is already really engaging. So people were already anthropomorphizing, they were already requesting to spend extra time. And if you think as chatbots get more and more sophisticated, more and more people are going to attribute, you know, human-like properties to them. And, I'm not decided on whether or not anthropomorphization is just a form of play, or whether or not we end up deceiving ourselves. I think that it's a strange kind of case, because it does, there are times in which it looks like people are deceived. And so I do worry about this form of sort of self-deception. One of the biggest worries, I think, is not so much that we create robots with sentience, but that we create robots that are such good simulations that humans mistakenly believe they are sentient. And then, the robot rights movement and comes along, and people are starting to liberate robots, or, engaging with robots in ways that sacrifice quality human interaction. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot worse as these technologies get more sophisticated. Is addiction, sorry, should I just read the
Yeah,
next
go
one?
ahead.
Okay, so, but thank you for the question. So is addiction really the best way to characterize behavioral dependency on companion bot use? I'm specifically thinking of physical harm, relapse, and other criteria typically associated with addiction. It might be better to use terms such as problematic or maladaptive use. Yeah, this is a good question. So things like, you know, kids who are addicted, or people who are addicted to playing video games, it's not considered a sort of an official addiction in the DSM. It might be, physical harm, relapse, and other criteria. So you're right that physical harm, I guess, might not be a factor in terms of relapse. I guess relapse for sure, when people go on a cell phone detox or something, and then they relapse, right, at some point perhaps, and use their cell phone again, we say, oh, they're addicted. But the physical harm, I guess, yeah, it might be better to use those terms. I don't know how much actually rides on thinking of it as addictive or not. I think you're right that there's a real question over exactly how to think of these kinds of behaviors. They certainly share at least a family resemblance with addictions. Maybe that's the thing that I'd like to say, is that even if they're not addictions in the sense that we think of with classic kinds of addictions like drug addiction, that they share enough features with drug addiction such that it might be worth calling them addiction. And certainly there are not so much physical harms, but sort of mental harms. companion bots or pets? So for addressing elderly loneliness, for which do you think is a better ethical and emotional option, companion bots or pets? Yeah. So things like Pero have been mostly positive. There's been some, I mean, because, you know, there are cases where it's not realistic for somebody to have a real dog or a real pet in certain facilities. There's just too much maintenance. And so there is a kind of perhaps deception involved with Pero. There, it's maybe less clear. So the more human characteristics things have, the more we tend to attribute mindedness to them. And so it might be said that it's clearer that people who engage with beings like Pero are more aware that what they're doing is a form of play. Also for Aibo, which is that robot dog that's been used in sort of contexts where people don't have access to real dogs. And it's turned out that, so there's some of the positive consequences I know for Aibo were that it led to a lot of conversations between people. And similarly for Pero, where there was more interaction between people thanks to these sorts of zoomorphic companion bots. And so that might be a better option if it turns out that those kinds of pet-like creatures are better at facilitating human interaction. The companion bots, I think it's going to depend on how they're designed. Ideally, I think that they could also be facilitators of human interaction. Especially, I'll say that, you know, the solution isn't just to take, you know, in a care home is just to put a bunch of people in the room together and say, okay, now you're all going to interact. People still can report loneliness in care centers, even though they've got, you know, company. So a lot of loneliness isn't stemmed just from human presence, but also sort of the quality of that interaction. So, you know, on social media, you know, people who use things like TikTok and Instagram can often report feelings of loneliness, even though they're doing a lot of engaging with other people because of the nature of that engagement. And so even human interactions in care homes can go wrong. So figuring out the sort of the sweet spot of how to create meaningful social interaction, I think is one of the hurdles for the design of companion bots. And if that can be sort of surmounted, then it might be a better option than Pero or pets, other kinds of pets. And here I've got, how do you address reluctancy to companion bots to policymakers who can help provide the funding for further research and implementation, and to people who are recommended to use them, like an elderly person, for example? The UK has been a leader in recognizing the impact of loneliness. They have a minister for loneliness. Have they adopted technology like this as part of their strategy? So I don't actually know the question. I don't actually know the answer as to whether or not they've adopted technology like this, not to my knowledge. I mean, I know that there have been some pilot projects with respect to companion bots, but I'm not sure about what the funding situation is in the UK. But I mean, I think that, so if people haven't seen the documentary Alice Cares and you're interested in this topic, I'd highly recommend it. So Alice, which is the social bot that is supposed to help loneliness, that was a sort of that was a sort of partially state-sponsored initiative, and certainly part of what they were interested in was trying to figure out how to address the initial skepticism of the users themselves. The funding part, I think, is going to depend upon, you know, whether or not we as a society can show that the things that we're creating aren't just, you know, smartphones for elderly people, where, you know, enhanced smartphones that, you know, now all of a sudden they're all addicted to their tech and nobody's interacting. I think that seems like a dystopian outcome to a lot of people and probably to policymakers. So designing the answer, I think, comes from designing tech that is responsible and that has a sort of a human flourishing centered approach.
Thank you again. I just wanted to ask one more time if anyone has any final questions, as we are approaching 1 o'clock.
I'll just say that if you have any additional comments or questions, then feel free to email me. You can find me through UBC. And I should also acknowledge that I'm an affiliate faculty with the Center for Applied Ethics at the Vancouver campus, the W. Maurice Young Center for Applied Ethics, which I think I did not put in the bio. So. How do you see companion bots implemented in BC specifically? Yeah, so I mean, so that pilot project happening at the Jewish General is probably the closest we've got so far. Something happening in Canada where it's really the companion bot on that scale. But I mean, ultimately, I think that there's going to be probably the easiest and least sort of cost prohibitive option is going to be in terms of the sort of virtual AI assistants that I talked about that have a conversational function. So like a Jibo, which was this sort of family assisted robot developed at MIT that got, I think it got funded through Indiegogo, and now it just recently got bought up by NTT. They went virtual for Jibo in a lot of cases, as it was a little robot that, you know, was meant to sort of interact. And now most of it is virtual, and they're actually moving into healthcare. So initiatives like that, I think, are gonna be more and more common, where the least expensive way, because it's expensive to have all the hardware stuff. So if you can just have an app, that's going to lower your costs. So probably something like that will be rolled out before we ever actually see an actual robot. But the same ethical considerations apply.
Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it, and it was such an amazing talk. On behalf of everyone at the Dash team, including myself as a trainee, thank you, and we really, really loved it.
Thanks for having me.